Hi everyone and welcome back to the Fusion Industry Association. My name is Cyd Cowley. I'm a PhD student studying at the University of York and working at the Culham Centre for Fusion Energy. Today is Wednesday the 26th of July and I'm here to give you your Fusion News Roundup. Stories today include 1. UK at the forefront of new frontier for holy grail of clean energy. 2. Fusion industry investment passes $6 billion. 3. Scientists behind nuclear fusion milestone near repeat of feat in recent test. 4. Nuclear fusion will be a tool of geopolitics. I've been called into the White House multiple times. And of course, as always, we'll have some bonus stories as well for you. 1. UK at forefront of new frontier of holy grail for clean energy. The first story today comes from The Independent and argues that the UK is at the forefront of nuclear fusion development when it comes to public projects. In particular, this article focuses on the spherical tokamak for energy production, or STEP for short. For those seasoned veterans of our channel, you may remember that STEP is a project led by the UK Atomic Energy Authority, or UKAEA, to deliver an electricity-generating fusion prototype power plant by the 2040s. It aims to do so through a roughly 100 megawatt spherical tokamak, a donut-shaped device that is compactified so that it looks, well, spherical, as the name suggests. Now, in a lot of ways, STEP is one of the most important fusion projects ongoing, since it is by far the most progressed case of a government-funded plan to build a fusion power plant. Already, over £220 million has been given to the STEP program for an initial concept design for the tokamak. The location of STEP has also been decided, as it will be built in West Burton in Nottinghamshire. Even the future plans for STEP are pretty solidly laid out. The goal for STEP is to end the first concept design stage by 2024, followed by a more in-depth design stage between 2024 and 2032. After that, the UKAEA aims to start construction, which ideally will be completed by 2040. Because STEP is one of the most concrete projects for a fusion power plant, STEP program director Paul Methven describes STEP as Fusion's Apollo program. We are currently designing the rocket and building the team across both public and private sectors that will put our equivalent of people on the moon. It's an incredibly exciting opportunity for the UK to be at the forefront of this new frontier. 2. Fusion industry investment passes $6 billion. Our second story today comes from our own Fusion Industry Association, which released its third annual Fusion Industry Report just recently. These reports are fantastic overviews of the industrial fusion landscape and are great reads if you're a keen investor who wants to keep track of the growing list of private companies, or just someone who wants to learn more about the menagerie of methods for achieving fusion. One incredible highlight of the report is that the fusion industry has now received $6.2 billion in investment to date. More than 1.4 billion of which was in the last year alone. In addition to this continued funding, the number of fusion companies is also growing rapidly. This year's Fusion Industry Survey has had 44 entrants, which is the largest ever. And in fact, last year, more private fusion companies were started up than any year previously. Finally, though private fusion is still led in large by the US, a more diverse range of companies are beginning to form and join the Fusion Industry Association. New entrants this year include OpenStar from New Zealand, Novatron from Sweden, Gauss and Proxima Fusion from Germany, and Energy Singularity from China. Overall, the report shows it is an incredibly exciting time to be in the private fusion landscape. 3. Scientists behind nuclear fusion milestone near repeat of feat in recent test. Our third story today comes from Bloomberg, and I must say it is a fantastic piece of science journalism because it focuses on an often overlooked and mundane aspect of science: repeats. For something to be accepted as scientific truth, it cannot just be shown once, but needs to be shown again and again with consistency. Or else even the most fantastic result from an experiment might just be a fluke, and not indicative of the underlying physics. Repeats is exactly what this article focuses on, and specifically repeat experiments at the National Ignition Facility, or NIF for short. Some of you may remember that last year NIF broke headlines by achieving an ignited plasma, and then one-upped itself a few months later by achieving fusion break-even, where more fusion energy was outputted from the experiment than was inputted into the fuel by the lasers to heat and compress the fuel. But many of the shots in said experiment performed much worse than the record 3 megajoule shot that was the break-even shot. This is because in this ignited fusion plasma regime, minute changes in the fuel capsule, for example, can lead to massive changes in the fusion reaction rate. Now, since that record-breaking 3 megajoule break-even shot, NIF has been performing similar repeat experiments. And what's incredibly impressive is that on June 5th of this year, NIF achieved break-even again, as an experiment outputted roughly the same amount of energy as the lasers delivered. Though they are not at the stage where they can achieve this break-even every time, and though they did not match the 3 megajoules that they achieved before, Richard Town, the Associate Program Director at NIF, says they are learning and getting better. "We are making progress," Town said. "We haven't got a headline 3 megajoules again or higher, but I think with every experiment we ask ourselves, what are we learning?" Now, I remember when I was in school thinking that fusion break-even seemed something so far off, something so science fiction. But now that NIF is not only doing it, but seems to be able to replicate it, well, it seems like we're living in that science fiction world today. 4. Nuclear fusion will be a tool of geopolitics. I've been called into the White House multiple times. Our final story today comes from Recharge News and discusses an interesting, often undiscussed aspect of fusion, but an important one: its geopolitical implications. In this article, Recharge speaks to CEO of the Fusion Industry Association, Andrew Holland, who talks about the risks of countries being left behind in the development of fusion and fusion technologies if they don't make investments in this crucial delivery stage of fusion. He warns of a single country possibly taking over the market if other countries fall behind. Just like how China now dominates the production of semiconductor wafers for solar cells, controlling more than 2/3 of the global solar cell supply chain. To prevent this market domination for fusion, Andrew Holland says that countries such as the US need to avoid the so-called Death Valley for fusion investments. Now, this Death Valley is where typically startups begin operations and start spending loads of money to grow and build their operations, but can't yet make the revenue back on their own. This is the case for many fusion companies right now, which are now putting major resources into designing and building reactors, but have not yet started selling electricity. To get over this hurdle, Andrew argues that there needs to be broader mechanisms for investment into fusion in general. Since up until now, private fusion investment has mainly come from very targeted philanthropy. The general investor may not know how to invest in fusion, since, in Andrew's words, if you're not somebody who understands the difference between a laser-based approach and a magnetic approach to fusion, and just wants to invest in fusion, you should have the ability to do that. And it just doesn't exist right now. Overall, I think this is a very thought-provoking article about the needs and mechanisms for fusion investment in this vital time for our industry. Right, well, that's all for our main stories today, but wait, before you click away, we have some bonus stories as well. For the first, we have the fact that SOFE, the IEEE Symposium on Fusion Engineering, took place in July here in Oxford. The conference had a record attendance with over 700 delegates from 26 countries. I can personally attest to those numbers, since walking around Oxford the week of SOFE, I was delighted to bump into loads of fusion scientists and engineers everywhere I went. For those who may be interested in attending the next conference, the IEEE announced that it will be hosted by the MIT Plasma Science and Fusion Center and will take place in Boston in 2025. For our second bonus story today, we have a video from the Wired YouTube channel on their 5 levels of difficulty series. It's an excellent YouTube series in which experts explain their field of work at 5 levels of difficulty, starting by explaining it to a child and then ending up explaining it to another expert. And for this week's episode, they got Professor Anne White, who is a professor of nuclear science and engineering at MIT, to talk about nuclear fusion. It's an excellent video. I really recommend you check it out. Right, well, that's all for fusion news this week. I really hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please feel free as always to let us know your thoughts in the comments section below, or give us a like or subscribe to the channel. As always, if you want to take a deeper dive into any of the stories mentioned, their links will be in the description. Thanks for watching. See you soon.